You're listening to Raw with me, Tom Latcham. It's part three of this interview with Tony Coleman, who is also known as London Electricity, co-founder of Hospital Records. We talked in the past about some of the changes that have been made to Hospital Records, and we're going to probably see the fruits of those as we move out of the pandemic. But I'm interested to explore what it's been like running a label in a pandemic. I mean, before we do that, what is it like running a label in 2021, and how does that compare to when you started, which was of course on the cusp of the digital age, the internet, etc.?
I mean, it's radically different, and thankfully, I mean, Hospital's grown so slowly across 25 years, but the decisions that we made in terms of our position with regards to formats like digital and streaming and so forth, and then choosing the right staff to actually facilitate that. Because if you're nowadays, obviously the majority of what makes a label run comes from streaming. So, and you can't, to do that really well, you can't really rely on a distributor, because you're just giving away a lot of income. And the way to do it is to make personal relationships with the major players, and that takes time and expertise. So we've got staff who specialize in every kind of department of what it takes to be a successful label.
How many staff have you got now?
I was going to say, that's why we've got 25 staff. I think it's 25. I think we're recruiting 2 more this year. So it does, you know, if you want to be the best, then you have to have the best working for you. Obviously, you can't be the best. So, and that, all of that is an investment. But I mean, since talking about investments, we moved into a really lovely, shiny new office 2.5 years ago, and
just in time for lockdown.
no one's using it.
Yeah.
And actually, like, you know, as things open up, if they do, we're giving our staff the choice. You know, you can work from home, you can come in, and we're sort of advocating a combination, really. You know, because not commuting is brilliant, obviously,
but also you do lose a whole host of things, including you know, asking someone who's more experienced than you how you do a certain thing, or you know, just that discussion is a lot easier than a Zoom call, which might take however long, and you've got to put it in your diary. You know, you can just catch up with someone and go.
Yeah, but it's quite interesting, because when everyone was in the office, we've got a big open plan office, and if you didn't know it was a record label, you might think it was a call center, because everyone's got headphones on and they're doing their work. And instead of taking their headphones off and asking someone else to take their headphones off to talk to them, they'll just message them on Slack, even though they might be next to them. You know, it's like, so it's not
it's all the same anyway. Yeah,
it's actually not that different. And the only time that everyone really gets their heads together is breaks, like lunch break or team meeting, which might happen every 2 weeks, you know. So people are isolated anyway. I mean, I fought against that. So many, as it's, you know, younger staff came in and they were just in their headphones, and like I remember like putting a rule down that you're not allowed to wear headphones in the office. It's crazy, because everyone's working on music, you know.
Yeah.
And also in an open plan office, if you do get a member of staff who is gobby and likes to completely dominate the room with their voice, then that can be very disruptive, you know.
So is that part of the interview process where you're like, right, not to copy?
Well, yeah, you do try and sense that.
I bet you do.
Get it right.
So where does most of your money come from now? So back in the day, 1997, if you sold X thousand records, you made quite a significant amount of money. But now, if you probably don't. We've moved to largely digital, but limited vinyl, which is on the increase, admittedly, but still not to anything like the levels it was. Where does a 2021 independent record label make their money?
Okay, so like I said a little while ago, you have to work all the angles, and you need to know what the angles are before you can work them. So the angles are obviously streaming. That is the big earner. That's Spotify has taken over from iTunes, which pre-streaming was the big player for downloads. Sort of parallel with the beginning of iTunes, there was CDs were huge, incredibly profitable. They cost nothing to make. You could sell them for, some labels sold them for 15 quid. It was ridiculous. Now the angles are, I mean, we still do physical products, although it's getting a lot harder with Brexit because all the manufacturing places are in Germany or France or Czech Republic. So there's almost nothing in the UK anymore. So that's an issue. That is probably going to slowly kill the resurgence of vinyl, which is a real shame. So
Chris from Nightforce, Chris Howell, another big independent rave label who you'll of course know, he said the same thing, and he put out a big message saying we just can't get vinyl, and it's taken so long to do it. Why don't, there's only like 10 plants or something left, but now there is this resurgence. Why don't you independent labels get together and fund a new one?
Well, we got quite close to doing that about 10 years ago. And I sort of formed a coalition with Metropolis, who are a very high-end studio and mastering house, and also with our distributor SRD at the time. And we kind of sat down and thought, because we knew the pressing plants were going, and there was one in Harlesden that was just going up for sale, and we got very close to buying it. What made us decide not to do it is basically it's not our core business, and it would just it would have sapped our time, and we would have taken our eyes off the ball of the label and inevitably put our eyes on the ball of manufacturing records, So it was the right decision not to do it. And there's always this utopian idea that you suggested that, oh yeah, all the labels can get together, and it doesn't work.
When does that ever work? Yeah, quite.
It does not work, because everyone's got a different agenda. Everyone's got different amounts of funding. Everyone's got different amounts of work they're prepared to put into it. Doesn't work.
Is there a community in drum and bass?
Huge.
But they just don't agree.
No. There's a community that is very supportive and very enabling and full of love. And I think part of the reason that we have grown, drum and bass, that's what I mean when I say we, part of the reason we have grown and developed is that we also understand that actually working together is not always the best thing, and by working together I mean actually running a business together, a venture together. We'd rather kind of have third-party people to help do that.
Is that because money is the ruination of relationships if you're not tight already, if you're not part of business?
It really can be. People fall out over money. And it's not worth ruining a beautiful relationship for the sake of money.
No, indeed. In terms of the last year for you, I mean, it's been an interesting year for you, to put it mildly, and that's the pandemic. Of course, you just had a hip hop, which we mentioned at the start of the first episode. How bad was it before? Did it impact upon your performances?
Or my hip.
I mean, to have a hip hop, it must have been pretty serious.
No, I mean, it got really bad after the summer last year, 2020. I mean, I've always had sort of lower back problems, but no, this was quite quick, you know, and the timing was good, really, because there were no gigs, so I wasn't missing out on any gigs.
Do you think it came on because of lockdown, because you weren't active and your mind goes, "Uh-oh, you're not doing anything now, so this is the time for you to tell that you're hip"?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. It's like, yeah, maybe my body was going, all right, so you're not doing any gigs. You're nearly 60. I'm going to fall apart on you. You know, yeah, quite possibly. It's like that thing when you're touring frantically, and when you stop, that's when you get ill. That's when you get a cold or the flu, or you know, it's like your immune system holds together while you need it to, you know, while you're in fight mode, and then when you relax, it kind of all goes. Bleh.
And has that fueled your decision to decide to step back slightly and take a more limited role in the record label?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My decision isn't to. It's not. I'm not looking at what I don't want to do anymore. I'm looking at what I do want to do. So I think, yeah, I think, you know, it's a good point in my life to really to think about my priorities and what's exciting for me. And you know, to be honest, Hospital Records is such a well-oiled machine. It doesn't need me
Right
anymore.
How does that make you feel? Proud or sad, or both?
Both. It's I mean, I haven't, you know, my kids are still young teenagers, but I can only imagine it's very similar to when you've dedicated your life to bringing up your kids, and they just leave and they go and do their own thing. It must feel a bit like that, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's been a difficult decision to make, but now I've made it.
Yeah.
Every cell in my body says it's the right decision.
It's funny, isn't it? It's the the sort of unanswered questions when you're thinking about something but you're not quite sure, and they all just goes round and round in your mind, and then actually making that decision is so freeing, isn't it?
It is freeing, and letting go, you know, letting go of your baby is, yeah, it's liberating, it's sad, it's exciting. I mean, the main thing is that for the last sort of 5 or 6 years, really, of running and building hospital, I haven't been challenged and excited by it. It got too easy.
Right.
And I don't like that.
Well, it's dangerous, isn't it, for anyone running a business? If it's easy, then you risk failing because you're just doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and it did feel like that. The annual release schedule was frantic. So it was like being on for me, it was like being on like the best hamster wheel in the world, you know, like really amazing hamster wheel that I'd created and helped create. But realizing I'm on this hamster wheel, and it was very stressful because the release schedule is insane. Stressful but not challenging is not a good combination.
No.
Right? Stressful and exciting and challenging is great. I'm all for that, and I love that, and I loved that about hospital for so many years.
And how have you found the last year in terms of running the label, performing or not performing rather, and missing the buzz of that? And you know, how has the label done? What you said, there were some surprises and some revelations. How have you weathered this particularly scary storm? Because I suppose with 25 employees, you are in a much riskier position than some of the smaller indies were.
Yeah, and what was, I mean, we kind of saw, I think like anyone with a brain, we saw lockdown coming way before the government did. And basically as soon as like New Zealand and Taiwan and places like that, they locked down instantly. You just say the word pandemic and they put up the drawbridge, you know, and that's exactly what we should have done. It was blatantly obvious. We're an island. We could have done that, you know. So we closed our office a month before the government told people to close their offices. We sent our staff home. We made sure that everyone was connected via Zoom, and we kind of like bedded in for that. The one thing that we nearly didn't keep it open, but we just thought no one's going to be ordering from the web shop, are they? So we should close it. And then Dave, who runs the web shop, he lives really close, and he said, look, I can just cycle over from my flat and there's only going to be a few orders, but I'll just do them in a couple of hours, you know. So we were like, yeah, that makes sense. And the first day of actual national lockdown, Dave went in and he started phoning everybody going, I need help. I need help. There's more orders than we've ever had before. And literally the shop went ballistic. Wow. Absolutely went ballistic. And we're talking like a 200% increase in orders and turnover on the web shop, which was a total shock. Wow. Really nice shock, but a total shock. And I mean, things that we would never expect to fly off the shelves in a lockdown, T-shirts, you know, which we always thought people bought to wear to gigs, but no, there were no gigs. And they were, every new design, every new repress we put in just flew, you know, and we started doing some quite extravagant clothing that we'd never done before, and it flew. And this is all in lockdown. It was amazing. So, and the other thing that we didn't at all see coming was that Spotify would go through the roof. Looking back on it, of course it would, because everyone was at home listening to it.
Yeah.
You know, for listening to it for a long time, not just like a dipping in and out. And so those two things completely compensated and more for the complete lack of events. And it turned out, against all our expectations, that last year was actually one of our most profitable years ever.
Wow.
And
so lockdown has been positive for the hospital.
People buying vinyl, they were buying, you name it, physical stuff, they were just buying it. And they were streaming shit. And like, you know, practicing DJs were buying off Beatport and like, or buying from our own site. And yeah, it was, we actually, going into lockdown, we thought, well, it's been a good run, but this is probably going to be it. You know, we're not going to survive this.
X amount of pressure, X amount of roar.
So we've talked a bit about, you know, during the pandemic and what it was like. You referenced about how you spotted the government and we're not getting this right, and you got ahead of them. You've also criticised them as being the most autocratic government that we've ever had. It's been a crazy time for politics, really, over the past 6 or so years. And you do a weekly podcast, which our listener, Benza Runner, loves. He says you're a legend, by the way. But it is unashamedly political, and you admit that yourself. Where do you get your political side?
I've always had it. Always. And honestly, I think, like, if you are a creative person, if you work in the arts, if you work in music, you are dealing with people all the time, and the whole notion of equality is so important. You know, it's a bedrock of what we do. It has to be, because when you work in music, you're you're what's the word I'm looking for? You fly over all of the normal day-to-day kind of day-to-day niggles and annoyances and sort of like the petty kind of human baggage that that basically runs the country and runs politics and is virulent in politics and in the media and so forth. But if you're all about pure music, then you're talking about people. You're talking about people's lives, the way people think, the way people get on, and you go straight to the core of, yeah, like I say, equality. It's all about that in every sense of the word, and that doesn't fit with a capitalist conservative right-wing environment where equality is a direct threat to a right-wing state of mind. You know, it really is. It's a direct threat.
Well, I sometimes get criticism on this podcast if I talk about the Tories in a critical manner. I mean, they have been in government almost, apart from 15 years, even a bit less than that, I think, over the last 40 or so, they've been in power. So, I mean, criticising the Tories isn't necessarily about criticising the Tory party. It's often about criticising the government. But still, I do get grief from it. I had someone unsubscribe from the podcast just yesterday. Well, you say it's fine, but, I think that everyone has a right to their own beliefs. That's absolutely fine. I agree with that. Yeah, that's equality, right? But the thing is, art never exists in isolation. It can't do. And certainly the rave scene hasn't and can't do either. So it's impossible to do a retrospective look at the 90s rave scene and beyond without looking at it through a political sphere. But while I've just told you there's a commercial risk to me being too political, and I think that people can probably infer what I am from the podcast, but I don't need to explicitly say it. But is there not an inherent risk commercially for you of being so politically vocal?
I actually think the reverse. I think there's a massive risk if you try and people please with everything that you do. Because
it's not about people pleasing, isn't it? Just about allowing people to have their own beliefs and not being critical for it. And listen, right? So
I've never disallowed anyone from having their own beliefs.
But you did say, can I read a quote from you? And you might know what I'm
saying. You're gonna prove me wrong. Go on.
You once said, "I don't give a fuck if anyone who voted for Brexit buys our shit or not." Right? And now, if I said that, given the number of people who listen to our podcast outside the big cities, I genuinely think that would impact upon numbers. Because, of course, 52% of this country did vote in that way. Now, I would say, how many Brexit voters do you think buy hospital record stuff anyway? So, you might say that's a relatively safe position to stand. But doesn't it make a rod for your own back? You have to be seen to be practicing what you preach. And I ask that because it's quite clear from all you say, Tony, particularly that quote about Brexit. But I've seen you tweeting lots of anti-racist sentiment. You are clearly an anti-racist. You talk about equality. You're obviously left-leaning, internationalist, liberal, with a social conscience, who's influenced by music and elements of jazz and all soul and funk. And of course, that originated in the Black community. And you are not, as far as I can see, a racist person. So how on earth did you in hospital find yourself in the position of facing a storm of allegations of racism in the past year?
At the time of Black Lives Matter, there was rightfully and understandably a massive backlash against anyone who was perceived to be let's just tell you what it is. Anyone who's perceived to be white but making money out of black art forms, if you like. Now, original jungle music, it wasn't completely black, but it was probably a majority of people making it and DJing it were black. The way drum and bass has evolved has certainly, like, to my ears and to my way of thinking, I've only ever heard the tunes and I've only ever heard the music before I signed it, and I would never, it never really crossed my mind, and maybe it should have done, because what I maybe looking back, I think what I'd like to have done now, if I could go back, would be more intelligent about racial balance within music and all, like, our little corner of music, drum and bass, and proactively restore the balance, I think, in terms of race and gender as well. So we are doing that now, and not only with our artists but with our staff as well. I think the timing last summer when it all kicked off online, the reason we got it in the neck, I think, more than anyone else, is probably because we're the biggest label in drum and bass. So we're a big target that you can't miss. And at that time, unfortunately, we didn't have any black staff. We weren't all white, but we didn't have any actual kind of like black staff. And whereas in the past we have, you know, so people could actually say, look, at hospital, there's no black people working there. And that was true. And it was like unfortunate timing. Very, very difficult for me and Chris, who we've grown up in black music, and my first kind of proper job before I started my first label was I ran a youth training scheme in Hackney and built a recording studio with my trainees. And I was, at that point, I was working exclusively with black kids who were my trainees. I was in my kind of early 20s actually, and it was brilliant. I loved it, and it was, again, I didn't see color, and I know that's been seen to be a racist thing in itself, to not see color. But I didn't, and I just saw people and music, and that was it, you know. So same with Chris as well, and it was very difficult to be called out and accused of being racist. And what was particularly hard for an organization our size was knowing how to respond to it and how to message about it or not message about it, and that was really difficult.
So just to bring people up to date, if they haven't got any clue about this, if this is the first time that they've come across you or whatever, and they don't know about this storm, because it was an online storm, a brief summary would be that you faced allegations of racism, or at best a lack of diversity on your rosters and staff over the years. And it reached a head last summer when CHRIS INPERSPECTIVE released several videos full of allegations about a lack of diversity, not signing or even knowing about certain black artists, and even he claimed quasi-racist language being used by employees at hospital. You released a statement apologising. You then launched a series of initiatives aimed at improving diversity, including a mentoring scheme for Black artists. Unfortunately, even that slightly backfired in a ham-fisted way when someone said that they were Asian and asked if they could also join the scheme because they were, BAME, minority ethnic, and someone said no because they're not Black.
When this all kicked off, and when he posted those videos, I actually had a quick look at the big drum and bass labels, if you like, which at that time were us, Ram, Critical, Vision, Liquidity, UKF/AEI/Drum and Bass Arena. And I had a look at all their rosters, and our roster was far more diverse than any of those labels. I was so devastated and stressed and hurt by this. I rang Cleveland Watkis. Now, Cleveland Watkis has always, over the years, been more than vocal about Black rights. You know, before it was fashionable to be vocal about Black rights, he was always, and he's had an MBE. He's huge figure within not only drum and bass but jazz, dance, ballet, you name it. Cleveland's in there, and I called him because I know that he's got a wealth of experience in this area, and he spent an hour on the phone talking to me and really explaining to me the concept of institutional racism, which, when he broke it down, made complete sense to me. Structural racism, institutional racism. And he said, look, you need to read these books because you will really learn so much. And he said, look, Tony, I know you're not a racist, but the depth of your learning, you need to learn more, which I duly did.
Did Cleveland Watkis's assessment of what may or may not be structurally racist resonate with what hospital setup is?
Inevitably, yeah. I mean, like, looked at without any historical context, that was how it looked, and I could see that. And what you have to do, you can't just respond with words. You know, I was very tempted, as you can imagine, to get on camera and make a response video because I was furious. You know, I was really, really angry. Luckily, the other directors said, that's not going to be a great idea, Tony, if you do that. So I didn't, because I am outspoken, and I would have thrown petrol on the fire if I'd done that. You know, it might have made me feel better for about 12 hours, and then I would have regretted it. I know that. So I had to keep silent. Otherwise, I'd just kind of like make things worse. I know that.
Did you at any point feel that that this had the potential to become an existential crisis to the label?
I think everyone on the label did. We all did. We were all in kind of spiritual agony for quite some time. And there is no blame attached to anybody in that situation. There isn't anyone to blame. We knew that we couldn't blame anybody else, and we couldn't blame ourselves because we hadn't done anything wrong. We'd always just signed music, you know, and I do take issue with you when you say you've employed and signed people who are like you. It's not true at all. It isn't. Yeah, I mean, it was a wake-up call, really. It was like, wow, we've been totally unaware that, yeah, we're middle class white, me and Chris. We started the label, we're still running the label. It's grown into this behemoth, this juggernaut, and it's a beautiful label. It's a beautiful concept. It's all about going the extra mile to show love to people, but it just so happens that even though we are signing and promoting black artists at this point in summer last year, there was no black people on the staff team, and that was not by design. That was just the way it goes sometimes. You know, people join, people leave, people get headhunted. We've had a lot of black staff over the years who've got headhunted by big companies, by the majors and so forth, and it's never been, we've never had a kind of, okay, we've got to have, if we've got 20 staff, we've got to have like 6 from this ethnic background and 3 from this ethnic background. You can't construct a company like that. It doesn't work. You know, you can't do that. But yeah, it was like we looked at it and realized, yeah, okay, I can totally understand why people at first glance think this. And it was all about knee-jerk reactions then online, you know, and I think a lot of people piled in to hate on us, maybe just because we're the biggest in the game, and if they're not part of our journey, then they feel left out or resentful or whatever. I mean, I've always been a rebel. I've always rebelled against the status quo, and when you become the biggest label, you become the status quo, so people are going to rebel against you. That's human nature, you know, that really is. Doesn't matter what you do, if you're the biggest, a lot of people hate you for being the biggest.
But people had a problem with you not because you're the biggest, but because you had elements of institutional racism, which you yourself have just admitted.
I think I don't think we were institutionally racist, because like I said, over the years we've never ever thought about color. We've always employed people on merit, and a lot of people have come through from various different backgrounds, genders, sexuality. It's never been a thing for us, but the one thing we didn't do was to really understand that we could have deliberately, proactively redressed the balance. And I think, like nearly every company, really, aside from I think aside from maybe companies that are on the front line of health and social care and so forth, who since the 80s have had positive discrimination policies, it never occurred to us in music to do that, because we don't discriminate, and it just didn't ever occur to us to do that, you know. So if that's institutionally racist, then we were institutionally racist by not positively discriminating.
So you mentioned that you had a little look at some of the other labels, and they were not particularly diverse either.
Their rosters were a lot less diverse than ours, put it that way. And in that shitstorm, I had phone calls with people who run Neuro labels, and they were just terrified, because, as you probably know, like Neuro is a form of drum and bass that it really emanates from Holland, from the Netherlands, and it is 100% white. There aren't any black Neuro producers at all. So it's got no elements of soul or reggae or funk or anything like that. It's pure kind of like white techno drum and bass, if you like, and they were bricking it, you know. So they're not racist either. That's the music they make. And
no, so the lead on from that is that clearly there is a lack of diversity on other major drum and bass labels, right? DJ Flight, she claims the drum and bass scene has been whitewashed. We interviewed Mampy Swift. We asked him about it. He said himself he'd seen elements of it and it was very painful. Do you disagree with their sentiment?
No, I don't. I mean, I think I can't speak for other labels, but certainly from my point of view and Hospital's point of view, we have never, obviously we've never set out to whitewash anything. We've just done our best to make music and to facilitate music. We never had a plan. We never had a business plan. Never in a million years would I imagine that we'd reach this size. You know, it's still a complete surprise to me, to be honest, that the Hospital has got as big as it's got. And it's got as big as it's got because we've shown a lot of love to our artists and our fans, and we've just tried to work as well as we can. And I am who I am. I can't pretend I'm not who I am. I'm a white middle class man, and so is Chris. So we can't change that. You know, that is who we are.
If you accept Flight and Mampy's assessment about the whitewashing of the scene, or in part at least, how has drum and bass come to that point where you're having to admit that is the case?
I mean, you understand the context of my view here. The problem with the term whitewashing is what it says is that someone's deliberately painted over a multicolored wall with a big paintbrush and a big pot of white paint. That's what whitewashing is. That isn't certainly not what we've done, and that's not what I've done. So I do take issue with that.
A year on, what tangible impact has this all had in your view?
For me personally, I did a lot of studying last year, and reading a lot of books from Akala to biographies of Miles Davis, Malcolm X, and in between. So I feel a lot more educated now. I also feel like it's like any struggle to get things right in life. It doesn't end, and it kind of can't end. It's almost like the struggle to be a good person. You strive to be a good person. You will never actually be a 100% good person. So there isn't a utopian balance to be achieved in any area of life. But if you educate yourself, and if you've got good intention, and at the end of the day, if your philosophy is love for people, then you have to make sure that as many different people and types of people do feel your love, you know. And I will stand together with anybody who's being discriminated against, and I always have. So whilst it was very, very painful to be on the receiving end of accusations of racism, I knew in myself that I wasn't a racist, but I also found out pretty quickly that I didn't have my eye on the ball, and I didn't quite realize or I didn't realize that because we weren't thinking about color, we were thinking about music, and it's not an excuse, because there's no blame attached to me or to hospital or to anyone else who's made accusations. I guess thinking about race wasn't on my radar, because I've always known that I'm not racist. Whereas now thinking about race is very, very important. And everything changed with George Floyd.
Of course.
I'm very glad it changed. I'm very, very glad that it kicked off last year. And believe it or not, I'm very glad that I was accused of being a racist, because it's made me reassess myself and made me rethink and made me read, study and learn. And I'm glad that my beautiful label, Hospital Records, was accused of being racist, because what's coming out of that is we are now being a better version of ourselves. So I'm glad it all happened. I'm very, very glad for Black people that it happened, because my God, it needed to happen. It really did. And it still needs to happen. I mean, it's not resolved, and it's hopefully going to get a bit more resolved. But with our government and their views on immigration, you only have to look at the handling of the Windrush scandal. I mean, it's bleak in this country, you know, and it's bleak in a lot of countries. But all any of us can do is to just look at our tiny little piece of the jigsaw and get it right.
What does that involve?
It's thinking, you know, it's knowing, it's thinking, it's learning. And certainly with Hospital over the last sort of 9 or 10 months, we have been actively recruiting a much more diverse workforce, and also actively seeking out drum and bass producers from different backgrounds and different genders, and that's a really, really good thing to be part of.
What about on your management team? Because I work for a sports agency, and one of our it's a British Asian run sports agency, and one of their goals is to not increase underrepresentation, improve underrepresentation in the sporting world. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is role models. So, you know, we're very new, but we've had some small wins so far, and one of them has been getting a young British Asian footballer back into the game, who had not been playing football and had been selling cars at the age of 23.
Wow.
And he's now back playing. And we got and just a couple of weekends ago, he played at Wembley in his return game. You know, so and that we had, off the back of doing a bit of PR around that, we've had messages from people going, "Hey guys, we're British Asian we want to play football, but we feel that the system isn't really set up for us. There's no role models." Seeing this guy Maz do that has really inspired us. So, but it requires, and I speak to people in this world, represents some of the other people I speak to, managers, in terms of representation. He's like, I've spoken to people and they say it won't change until the makeup of the football clubs change. So, and that means the board, and you won't get the coaches in unless the boards are also have representation on them. So is that something you're trying to do as well? Because it's all very well, staffing your office with X number of different types of people, if no one actually gets to see that happen. What people do take inspiration on is who's behind the decks, or who's knocking out that record that they really love, and being in those sort of middle distance photos. That's what people look for. So is that not only in terms of but in terms of the management, the driving force of your label, is that somewhere you're trying to improve representation too?
Yeah, I mean, when I took the decision to step back from the day-to-day running, hospital, I did give advice to the board, and I said, look, we really need we need representation on the board of directors, and that's my advice.
And
So
is it going to be followed?
I think when the right person comes along, because when you appoint a director, you cannot appoint a director for unless you're a huge company. You see, if you're massive, if you're a multinational corporation, well, you can afford to appoint directors of every creed. When you're a company like us, you can't afford to do that, because you have to be a viable business. Otherwise, all your artists get dropped and we go out of business. So a director has to be someone who is right for the company in so many different ways. So our task, and the board of directors' task, as I see it, and as I've said in board meetings, is to have our radar on for a person of colour who will take the company forward with the board. And it's a long-term goal, and it's not something you can fix in the short term. It really isn't. All of the directors, I mean, when hospital started, it was me trading as. I was a sole trader, and that was the business. And when Chris left London Electricity, I turned it into a limited company, and me and Chris were directors, and we gradually, it's such a slow process to appoint directors. It's the two other directors on the board have been appointed because they've worked with us for years and proved themselves to be director material. And it can only be a long-term strategy. It can't be short-term.
Well, that's what you're doing as a label, but you're very well connected to all the other labels. Is there a feeling of desire for change among other labels, and are they also actively taking steps to do it, or are they just hoping that that they're not in the firing line next? Because unfortunately, you've taken the flak for something that you say exists across the scene.
It exists across drum and bass, and it exists across the music business, and it exists across the industry. But now that we've seen the wood for the trees, and we realise that this is a problem that you can't just sit back and hope is going to get better. If you've got any kind of influence, you have to do what you can to make it better, and that takes time. It takes time in business. You can't change things overnight. So, and people won't see the change until you actually make it. But some of those moves are very long and very drawn out. What other labels are doing, you'd have to ask them, and it's certainly not something that I would ever ask another label.
Why not? Isn't it important that on some things you can't agree? Money, right? I get it. I get why money comes in between you, but the desire to promote people from all walks of life surely should be a unifying factor among all of you that you can agree on.
Yeah, and I cannot, or anyone from hospital, we can't preach that unless we've shown that we're an example of that. And as I said, it takes a long time to change the makeup of management and board of directors. Now we've done it with gender. I mean, like a few years ago, it was all men. working in hospital and managing, and now all the managers are women. So,
but again, you know, and
it's
to divert too far from the point is that was sort of how jungle was in the 90s. And let's face it, jungle in the 90s was incredibly sexist. There was one serious DJ and producer, DJ Rap. There were a few others who were slightly smaller, but there was only one. And everyone goes, but it wasn't sexist because they all used to run they used to run things. You're like, well, no, but that is sexist.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sexism has been rife and still is rife in huge areas of the music business, but it's not rife in hospital records.
No. But there is, I notice, unless your website isn't up to date, there is only one female artist pictured out of 37.
One male artist.
One female artist pictured.
One female artist.
Yeah.
We've
now that's not to say that you're not improving things upon the scene. I know you say it takes longer, but I mean there are loads of great female producers out there. There are. So why is there only one out of 37 current on your website? Is it your website's out of date, or is it that you haven't signed them yet?
Yeah, we haven't signed them yet. I mean, we've been putting a lot of energy into workshops for women in drum and bass, and they've been great workshops, so that we can discover talent, you know, and we are discovering a lot of talent. We're releasing a lot of tracks by female producers on our compilations, and that is traditionally, that's the way we've always got to know artists before we sign them, is by working with them on compilation projects. So, and see how they are in the process of working together, because we collaborate with our artists. We don't tell them what to do, but we, like I said earlier, we help them to be the best version of themselves. And that means we can't sign anyone who isn't prepared to at least consider positive criticism. And believe me, there's a lot of artists who won't consider it.
I believe you.
Their egos get in the way. So, and it takes time to kind of understand that relationship with an artist. You know, you have to go through the process with a few tunes for compilations or remix, and then you get an idea of what the artist is like, and then you can say, right, I do want to work with this person, or I really can't because they're a nightmare. And that applies to male producers, any producer,
everybody, every human.
So it takes time. You can't just suddenly go, fuck, we need to sign 6 female artists. Okay, right, who's out there? We're gonna splash the cash and then we'll look better. You can't do that because you're doing everyone a disservice. Not doing it for the right reasons.
Last question on this particular thing, and thank you for being so generous with your with tackling this. I think you know, I know it was a very painful time for you and for a lot of people that are involved in this, and it remains a difficult and painful topic for a lot of people. So thanks for talking about it. Sort of last question, unless one comes out of this one, but all the changes that you're attempting to make or endeavoring to make, and you believe that other labels hopefully are too, fast forward 5 years, because you know it takes a long time, you've said that, maybe 10 years, what would you like to see happen to the drum and bass scene when we talk about its makeup? And I'm talking actually about ravers, because certainly at your events, and I've seen loads of videos of all your events, I've not been to hospitality yet, but I'd like to. They are largely white people, and I don't quite know why that is the case. And again, it might go back to role models. You know, it might go back to seeing that as role models. I don't know, but in 5 years' time, what would be your ultimate desire, and what's realistic?
Well, those are two different things, as always in life. In 5 years' time, I ideally would like to see a black person on the board of directors of hospital, and because people who invest their time and their money in a lifestyle brand, because we are kind of like a sort of tiny little lifestyle brand within drum and bass. People who invest in that they invest in it because they feel it represents them. And if we don't have anyone at the helm of Hospital Records of colour, then black people aren't going to feel represented by us, and they're not going to want to come to our shows. And you're absolutely right. I would really like to see the people who come to our gigs, I'd like to see them represent a cross-section of British society. I really would. That is my ideal vision. Realistically, it takes longer to even to move towards that, to visibly move towards that, because people don't really know what changes you're making under the hood in terms of the machinery. And you make changes, and then if you do it right, they bear fruit gradually. So how it's actually going to be in 5 years, I don't know. You know, I really don't. But I know that we've got a lot of positive work to do, and we are doing it behind the scenes. So, and I'm hoping in 5 years' time, people can look back and go, yeah, I can actually see that hospital have gone on this journey, and it's a very positive thing.
Well, it's a noble aim, and as I say again, thank you for being so open and honest about that whole situation. Up next, you want to say something a bit more? Go on.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to actually talk honestly about it, and it's easier to talk about it now than at the time when it was so inflammatory. So, yeah, thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. And up next, as we wrap up this 3-part interview, we are going to take a little look about what's coming in the future for Hospital, even if it is without the best A&R man in the world.
Oi, oi! Go check out the new digital 6-track EP, A New Hype, from the 14-year-old DJ Seema. Yes, 14 on fullthecallrecordings.bandcamp.com. That's fullthecallrecordings.bandcamp.com. Full the call recordings, full the call recordings.
DJ Seema.
Full the call recordings, full the call recordings.bandcamp.com. Did that work? I mean, sounds more ravey in Essex than Warrington though, doesn't it?
We really hope you're enjoying yet another one of Raw's in-depth interviews about the rave scene, which we are proud to say are now all curated into the British Library Sound Archive. All of us here at Raw HQ love how much you love what we do, and your generous one-off donations have been a huge help in covering our initial costs. But we're now a team of 5, putting in a combined 80 hours a week for no wages, with big plans to expand further, and so our costs are going up. As such, we could really use your help to keep Raw growing and developing, as you've seen us do since our launch in July 2020. First up, go and check out our brand new website. It's rawuk.com, where you can find loads of cool extra content, and you can grab Raw's first ever range of merchandise. That's rawuk.com for our new flashy website. We've also launched a new membership scheme where you can support us financially to create more content on an ongoing basis for less than the price of an oat milk cappuccino, plus you get great perks in return. Head to patreon.com/rawukpods. That's patreon.com/rawukpods to see exactly what's on offer. You can also join our YouTube membership, which is basically the same. Or if you're not asked about a membership, but you'd like to support us with a few quid as a one-off or a repeat donation, then head to our website and click the PayPal link. A reminder of that new website URL yet again, rawuk.com. Big love and respect to you all. Please keep supporting us. Hope you enjoy the rest of the act.
Friday the 20th of August 2021, a new event, Return to Source, celebrating 90s rave, hardcore, jungle, happy hardcore, drum and bass and techno, touches down at Suki 10C in Digbeth, Birmingham. We have Fusion South Coast legend DJ Druid, Quest and Fiber Optics DJ Fallout, the Uprising Northern legend that is DJ Paulo, and London Town's final trickster playing his first happy hardcore set in over 18 years. Tickets are priced at only £14. Just search Facebook and Eventbrite for Return to Source Rave.
So we're coming towards the end of this 3-part interview with London Elektricity, aka Tony Coleman, aka the co-founder of Hospital, who has revealed that he is going to take a step back from the day-to-day running, perhaps, and focus more on his creativity. But he'll still, I'm sure, be very influential at Hospital. And Tony, what is the future for Hospital in the next year as we come out of COVID, and then also beyond? Do you have plans to grow further? How big can you grow?
Well, we've never planned to grow, so we don't plan to grow. Growth happens, and it's a very organic process. So we may shrink a bit, we may stay the same size, we may grow. I don't know, but it's certainly not an aim of anybody in Hospital Records. So in terms of music, we have got some really exciting things on the back burner or front burner, whatever. Something I can't actually tell you about because we haven't publicized them yet. So obviously we've got a lot of rich albums that are being written at the moment by our artists. We've got a new album from Degs coming up. We've got a new album from Inja coming up. I've got a remix album of Building Better Worlds, my last album, which is obviously called Rebuilding Better Worlds. And we've got a series of compilations called Future Symptoms, which are a home for unknown artists or emerging artists, and there's definitely an emphasis on those for us to get to know female producers, black producers of drum and bass, and people from various different backgrounds. And it's certainly within our kind of sector of music, if you like. I mean, people refer to us as a liquid label, and I understand why, even though I've never been that comfortable with that term. But there aren't many liquid artists, producers who are black at all. So we have to look, and we are looking very, very deep and hard at that. And we want people to get in touch with us if they are making, let's say, soulful kind of harmonic drum and bass, for want of a better word.
Well, there you go. If anyone has listened to this, the direct line into Tony Coleman, you know, the best A&R in not the world. We'll say lounge, whatever. One of the best A&R men in rave has said, get in touch. He wants to hear from you. He wants to hear from you in different sort of genres and fields. I've got a suggestion. I'll tell you one afterwards. We've run them on track. We've run one on Track Tuesday. It's fantastic. I'll flag it to you afterwards.
X amount of pressure, X amount of roar.
You've always at Hospital decided to stay independent. Why?
It probably goes back to my very early experience in the music business. When I had my band Is It, and we made a track called Stories, and we self-released it, and it did really, really well. And then Paul Oakenfold was setting up Perfecto, which was funded and basically a division of London Records, which got taken over by Universal. He signed it and remixed it and released it. And to this day, and this was 1988, and to this day, we have never been accounted for it by a major label, and it charted. That experience alone was enough to make me think I cannot trust major labels because they're run by accountants and shareholders, and the last thing of all that they're interested in is the well-being of their artists. The only person I can trust is me. And that at that time that I knew, obviously there are people now I've met along the way who I would definitely trust with my career. But at that time, the only person I can trust is me. And that kicked off my journey of being independent and fiercely independent, proudly independent, never wanting to dance with the lizards of this scene. You know, I mean, we've had, don't get me wrong, as you can imagine, we've had quite a lot of sort of takeover / buyout interest.
Yeah. Have you ever turned down big cash in a buyout?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How much have you turned down?
I can't say. I can't tell you. It'd be
Tens
wrong.
of millions?
It'd be wrong to tell you how much. But what I do know is, and I've seen it happen. You know, I mean, you mentioned Andy C very early on. Andy and Scott sold RAM to BMG a few years ago, and BMG let all of their staff, apart from one, Jim, the label manager, go. So they just let them all go. BMG wanted catalogue, and at that time they came to see us as well. They wanted our catalogue. They were hoovering up catalogue for streaming, basically treating independent labels with their rich history just like a library, you know, treating them like a music library. And I couldn't do that to my artists or my staff. No way. That's exactly what would happen. You know, they'd sack all the staff. Most of your artists get pissed off.
But if someone came to you with 100 million quid, there's 25 staff, everyone's going to do quite well. Everyone's going to do quite well out of that, and they wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thank you. No one's ever going to offer £100 million for an independent small drum and bass label. That's not going to happen. You know, people aren't stupid when they're flashing their cash around, and they want to know that they've got a really good deal because they're backed by venture capitalists, and VCs want to triple their money over 5 years. So they're not going to offer unrealistic amounts of money. It's just not going to happen. And whatever they can offer isn't going to be enough. Put it that way.
Okay. And what about you as an artist? I know that you're going to be going down a more creative route and leaving the running of the label slightly behind. But as you get into your 60s, what do the next 10 or 15 years look like?
I've absolutely no idea. And I like having no idea. It's brilliant.
Zimmercore.
Yeah. Zimmer step. Yeah. Yeah. My mum's pretty good at that. No, I've got no idea. And like I say, it's really nice to not know. You know, I know that I'm extremely creative and I'm loving being in the studio. And as an artist, believe it or not, I've just signed my first ever record deal with Hospital Records.
Well, congratulations. I'm surprised you weren't able to do it earlier, frankly.
Well, I've never had one. I never didn't want to have one. You know what? Why? Yes. But yeah, the company.
Look, if you can't give yourself a record deal when you run the flipping thing, then when can you?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So
are you gonna will you ever retire?
No, I mean that the whole notion of retire is weird. It's like, what do you do when you've retired? Does that
go
mean
make music?
Does that mean you can't make music anymore?
No, but I mean, that's maybe in a way, this is sort of like a slowdown in your life into something where you're going and pursuing things where with a less business focus, where you can create more. And that's what you often do. That's sort of what my parents have sort of, you know, they wind down their work and they do a few little bits here and there, but things that they really enjoy.
Yeah. It's not going to mean that I don't make music. So
no,
I'm never going to retire as an artist. I can't, you know, I'll retire when I die.
Well, I mean, we all do.
Yeah. But I have to be making music. You know, it's too precious not to. So
and what do you see as the future for the drum and bass scene? What will that look like post-pandemic?
Well, in terms of the events, nobody knows. You know, nobody knows how the pandemic and post-pandemic would affect licensing of events, because to do big events, whether it's indoors or outdoors, you have to be able to secure licenses, and that's the kind of not so glamorous part of doing it all. And none of us know how that's going to be in a post-pandemic world, because people might attach very, very difficult conditions to having a license, such as testing all 12,000 people who come in, making them wait for the results of the test, or paying for extremely expensive sniffer dogs, because there are sniffer dogs who can sniff COVID. If there's those kind of requirements, it will make a lot of events impossible to put on. So, and events overseas, like our beloved beach party, which we've had to cancel last year and this year, we're sincerely hoping it can go ahead next year, because it is an amazing event. We don't know next year if there's going to be more spikes in mainland Europe, if there's more spikes in the UK. We don't know, so we don't know what the quarantine situation is going to be. We hope it's going to be workable, but nothing's going to be the same. I know that.
And what will that then do in your mind for the music? Because we've had people on, Darren Styles is a good example. He was like, there's no way that I can play what I was playing when the pandemic started to when we go out again and we go free. But I don't know whether anything's going to work, because I haven't played it no one's played it on a dance floor. So I'm creating music that I've got no idea that people will want to dance to or like. So, I mean, does the changing shape of the event industry mean that the music will be different?
It's an interesting point, and I've thought about that, and I actually think that from a raver's perspective, because they've been denied the opportunity to properly rave to the music they love, they're probably going to want a bit of a catch up musically, because if you come at them with 2 hours of new music that no one's ever heard on the dance floor, they'll be disappointed.
Interesting. Yeah,
they've been locked in, unable to rave. They're desperate to rave. They're going to want to hear the big tunes that were big in 2019, because it will kind of refresh them, restart them on their journey, make them feel really good about where things were and where things are now, and then you develop from then.
That's interesting. An interesting way of.
I mean, if you put yourself,
you're going to put on an old school event, basically.
No, old school. I mean, like, a sort of like 2 years ago school.
Yeah.
But I mean, and within that, it's always a good opportunity to build your set and slip in brand new tunes and see if they work. And if they work, great. They're good. They work in that context. If they hold the floor, if they hold everyone's attention, then that's the mark of a good future tune. So you have to be intelligent with the way you put your set together, Okay.
And to sum up this interview, looking back over your impressive 25-year career in the drum and bass scene, what's been your favourite year of that 25 years, and why?
Mikey. In terms of I don't know, my favorite year, I suppose 2003. That was a really good year. I released $1 Billion Gravy. It was the year that we smashed it by joining iTunes a long time before anyone else in our scene. Did my first live incarnation of London Elektricity, and the label was really showing signs of this is going to go well. That was an amazing year, and it was still only a handful of us doing it, working off gut instinct, and not having to worry about any rules whatsoever.
Nice.
You know, no rules, no regulations, because
Yeah.
we're off everybody's radar. You know.
And you were building, and you was just a small group of you. And what's been your proudest moment?
There's been a lot. I mean, proudest moment was playing Song in the Key of Knife the very first time in 1997 at Club Blue in Tokyo. Played it off that tape, which was the tape we used to master onto. And that completely went off. That was an incredibly proud moment. Very proud standing on the stage at Heaven on our first ever event there. That was an immensely proud moment. I mean, I haven't got proud often because I've always thought if you get proud of your achievements too much, then it stops you from trying harder. And I've always been one to never look back and only look forward. So I probably haven't been as proud as I should have been at various occasions. I mean, Hospitality in the Park 2016, the first one, that was remarkable. It was amazing. I was like overcome with pride before it even opened. I was just driving around in a buggy looking at the stages and the kind of the way we just set up that area was unbelievable for me. Playing at the beach, really proud when my youngest son, who was 9 at the time, he recorded the lead vocal for one of the tracks on my last album, Time to Think, and it was in this room with Inja. Inja wrote it for Stanley, and Stanley is the Secretary General, and he performed it second take, nailed it. It was amazing. I was so proud of him. And I was proud of the chairman, who's my oldest son, like at Glastonbury quite a few years ago. I think he was 6, and I was at Glastonbury. You do loads of different gigs, you know. You do your kind of big one, and you do lots of little ones. And I was in a little one, and I didn't have an MC, so he just said, "Dada, can I MC for you?" So I said, "Yeah, no. just run it by me first. What you're going to do?" And so it wasn't going to be like really annoying, you know. And he was like playing with his little brother outside, playing with loom bands. That was a craze at the time, these little elastic bands. And every now and then he'd pop in and he'd get on the chair and he'd say, "Dada, I want to say, make some noise." Okay. So I gave him the mic and he did that, and everyone went, "Woo!" You know. And he disappeared, and then he came back. He said, "Dada, I'm going to say this. If I say Glasto, you say Bree, Glaston, Bree," like that. I said, "Yeah, cool response. Do it." And he did it, and it was amazing. It was awesome.
Nice.
That was it. That was all he did. You know,
that's wicked.
I was very proud of him.
Has he got a future as an MC?
No.
His
little brother is more likely to do that, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah. And what do you hope, when all is said and done, will be your legacy?
If you're a producer and an artist and performer and everything, obviously what you create is a legacy. I mean, I haven't really thought about it, but I've made a lot of albums, and I'm going to make a lot more. That's a legacy. But if you also make a difference in the industry and in the business, and a positive difference, which Hospital Records most definitely is and will continue to be, then that is a legacy too. And that's something that it's actually really nice for me to be able to say that, because when I was in the thick of it all, just running on adrenaline, always looking to the future, always worrying about the future, never looking back and taking stock, I could never see that there's a huge legacy there. And there is, and it's not my legacy, it's the legacy of everybody who's worked at hospital. And it's also a legacy of all of the artists at hospital. And most of all, it's a legacy of the fans and the people who've come on the journey with us and trusted us to come on the journey. It's your legacy too.
Nice. Well, that seems like an opportune moment to end this interview. I'd like to thank you again for your time and your generosity of spirit, and for talking about some difficult topics, which I think you've talked about publicly before. So thank you very much for all of that, and we wish you the very best in your semi-retirement.
Trust me, it's not going to be a retirement. I'm not doing the gardening.
We'll see. Get them slippers on and get into the lounge call. Cheers.
I'm not giving up the podcast. Don't worry. You've still got competition.
Very good. You'll be able to tune into that. Top man, thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Good man. Well, that's it for another episode of Raw, and if you like what you've heard, we'd love you to get involved. All of us here at Raw HQ buzz hard off how much you, the Raw crew, enjoy our work, and your generous cash donations have been a huge help since our launch. But we're now a team of 5, putting in combined 80 hours a week for no wages. We've got loads of plans to go further, expand our team and offer, but that does mean that our costs are also increasing. So we could really use your help to keep Raw growing and developing, as you've done since we started. So please do check out our website. Initially, it's rawuk.com for interesting extra content and to get your hands on our first ever range of Raw merchandise. That's rawuk.com. We've also launched a new membership scheme where you can donate to create more interesting and fun content on an ongoing basis, and you'll even get stuff in return. So head to patreon.com/rawukpods. That's patreon.com/rawukpods to see what's on offer. You can also join our YouTube membership, which is the same, or if you're not bothered about membership but you'd like to support us with a few quid as a one-off or repeat donation, head to our website and click the PayPal link. That website URL, one more time, rawuk.com. Respect to you for your support and for getting to the end of this episode. Please keep supporting us and help ensure there's more quality content coming your way on a regular basis. Oi, oi.